Okay, great. So we're now going to move to a kind of panel, and in the other events we've done, we said that we're trying to advance the state of the art and looked at very much the state of the art. I think this is slightly different because we're going to look at the state of the art and the opportunity for a couple of sports, and then the kind of strategic position. So first up is David Marnie, who is Chief Strategy Officer of the ECB. I always wonder where Wales goes in the ECB formulation. David, so you're going to tell us where Immersive fits in with the world of cricket. Then Chris Ayler is going to talk about the opportunity as seen from the motorsport. And then Tim Part from MTM Consulting is going to talk more generally and introduce us into a kind of panel discussion about, give us an overview of the marketplace. So, David.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Edgbaston. It's wonderful to do this at a cricket ground on a sunny day, which doesn't always happen in cricket. So what I want to talk to you about today is two things. So first of all, I'm just going to take you through the state of cricket. I'm conscious that whilst you might be sitting at a cricket ground, probably not all of you are cricket fans. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about what we're doing in cricket. And then I'm going to talk to you about cricket and immersive technologies and what we're doing in that space. So to start off with, cricket as a global sport. It's played in over 100 countries across the world. There's about 800 million fans worldwide. 730 million fans watched the T20 in 2016. And 2.5 million watched the T20 final in 2016. So a huge global sport, which is growing both in the men's game but increasingly in the women's game. So last year we sold out the women's final at Lord's, the first time a women's final had ever been sold out, increasing hugely and a real priority for us as a sport. In terms of the domestic audience, we're the second most played team sport in the country. We've got over 10 million followers. Our attendances have been growing year on year. And last year there were over 700, or 2016 rather, there were over 700 hours of cricket broadcast live in the UK. So a huge opportunity for us to take those audiences into new experiences. In terms of the ECB and what we've been doing over the last few years, so we introduced a new strategy 2 years ago, and we've been working hard to change the perception of cricket and to change how it engages with audiences. So firstly and most importantly, we did new broadcast deals last year with the Sky and the BBC. So we're taking cricket back to the BBC the first time in 21 years. And with Sky, we've doubled our revenues from 2020. And that includes a new division on rights, which I'll come back to a bit in Q&A. We've also launched a new tournament from 2020, so a concept called the 100, which some of you may have heard of. It's an 8-team city-based tournament. It will play for 4 weeks in the year, and we believe it gives us an amazing opportunity to take cricket to new audiences, to family audiences, over a short period, using technology at the heart of it to drive a new experience of cricket. Leading up to that, next year we've got the World Cup in 2019, so the Cricket World Cup hosted across England and Wales, which will reach over 3 billion viewers across the world, so I think it's either the second or third biggest sporting event in the world. We won the Women's World Cup last year, which was fantastic. We're also driving a new programme called All Stars, which is a entry-level programme for 5 to 8-year-olds. We're going to have a much bigger focus on children and young audiences over the next 3 to 5 years, which is going very well. And then the final thing, which is slightly dry, but for us hugely important, is that we've just reformed our governance. So we have a fully independent board, which gives us the opportunity to take genuine strategic decisions about the future of our sport. That's all underpinned by a strategy which we call Cricket Unleashed. I won't take you through the full details of that, but the key thing here is that it's about being brave in everything we do in cricket, and it's about putting innovation at the centre of what we do, and it's why this conversation is enormously exciting for us. In terms of cricket and immersive technologies, I think it's worth just reminding ourselves that cricket actually, it's not a sport maybe that everyone associates with innovation, but has a very, very rich history of innovation. So On the left there, you've got Hawkeye technology. We were the first sport to introduce Hawkeye. You've got Snicko, hotspots, revs per minute. The one in the bottom is called the catapult technology, which is where we put sensors on each of the players. And the last one is motion capture using biomechanics, which is what we use for fast bowlers in particular, to check how they're moving, to look at their movement and to work out how they can bowl both more efficiently and also without breaking themselves, which is obviously a key part of fast bowling. So a huge and rich history of innovation around cricket. In terms of our thinking around immersive technologies, as Andrew said, we split it into two parts. Virtual reality. You can look around and there are wild numbers floating around about the opportunity around virtual reality. At least 82 million in the last 2 years, growing up to a lot more than that over 5 years. Clearly a big opportunity. But actually, I agree with Andrew, the opportunity for us is augmented reality. So in every smartphone globally, an enormous opportunity. And so we think about them both. But if I had to bet the house on anything right now, I'd bet the house on augmented reality. In terms of what we're doing, we've already started experimenting. So this is a thing that we take around to every international ground in the country at the moment. So it's a VR experience hosted by NatWest. It allows anyone to come along, put on a VR headset, and have a go at seeing how many runs they can score off 6 balls. It's been immensely successful. I was at an event last night, as it happens, where we had the entire England team doing this. Joe Root scored 28 off 6 balls, which was pretty impressive and the highest score anyone's ever got. It's been amazing to watch how this has engaged audiences, and really has been, for us, a proof of concept that doing things in this space is really going to reach audiences. So in terms of how we think about going forward, we divide it into 3 parts. So for us, there's a performance element. How do we help our elite players get better and how we can use this technology for that? There's a recreational element. So in the participation space, how can we improve the experience for cricketers at a recreational level? And then there's a consumer space, which is about how do we improve the fan engagement experience. And under all of that is that central question, which Andrew alluded to, which is how do we commercialise this and actually make it viable? How do we stop it simply being additional cost and at least get it to the point of break even, but hopefully get it to a point of revenue generation over the next 5 to 10 years. And then final slide, just to give you a little bit more meat on the bones about what we're thinking in this space. So in the performance space, this is about using VR in particular, or actually exclusively, to think about how we can train our players in advance of major events, tournaments, series, etc. So as the cricket calendar gets more and more congested, we actually have less and less time for warm-ups for big series. This year we flew to Australia 3 weeks before the Ashes started. So what we're looking at is how we use VR to replicate that high-performance experience on the ground in training throughout the year, so that actually when they land in Australia or wherever it may be, they hit the ground running. We then think that using that, you can translate that to a very interesting in-home experience. So if we are doing that at the elite level and we're working out how the fastest bowlers in the world can bowl at our batsmen, well, can we translate that into an in-home experience so the cricket fan can experience that at home as well? Can they be part of the Ashes? Can they have a go, etc.? We also think there's quite a big opportunity around AR in the club and recreation environment. So can we have an AR product which allows you to impose in your training, for example, England players, or in our All-Stars programme, can we have the All-Stars mascots running around in your back garden? All sorts of interesting ideas that we're playing with about how you can use this technology to create a new participation experience. And then finally, on the consumer side, it's about AR to increase the fan experience at games. So there's obviously examples of this already in terms of baseball having a AR app which you can hold up and you can see the players' stats, etc. We think cricket lends itself to this extraordinarily well because it's a data-rich game. It is a game where people have, throughout history, enjoyed the stats and the numbers and all the rest of it. So that ability to overlay an AR experience with a underlying data experience is very exciting for us. And we have enormous amounts of data, as you can imagine, about players and all the rest of it, which we can bring to that. But also, what's the VR experience at home? So people will be aware of things like best seat in the house, etc., etc. Can we take that stadia experience and take it into a VR environment. And going back to where I started, can we link that to a global audience and actually really try and grow something very interesting? So we think that cricket, because of the nature of the game, the way it's played, the way people experience, lends itself exceptionally well to this space, and we're very excited about being here. My details will be shared, I think, afterwards. I would love to hear from anyone in the room who's interested in working with us in this space over the next few weeks on the terrible deadlines that Andrew's setting us. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. So now I'll introduce Chris Aylett, who's been, you have been involved in this conversation right from the start, haven't you, Chris? I mean, and it's a very interesting conversation because, in fact, many parallels I would never have expected between cricket and motorsport. Data rich, simulation. There are a few sports that know as much about simulation as motorsport. So please come up and tell us how the world looks to you from the motorsport industry. So it's interesting that David's obviously given us an insight from the position of a governing body, and Chris represents an industry.
We're just handling high-tech changeover here. I'll kick off anyway, so because I've only got 5 minutes to tell you. I agree with you completely, Andrew. I love that presentation, and I just love talking to my international friends in America and all the rest of it, and annoying them by saying cricket is far ahead of us in terms of innovation. Do you know how the revs on the ball are important to the audience? So trust me, if cricket can do it, then we should do it. The difference is we have governing bodies, FIA and in the UK MSA, which is similar to your own. But we also, my organisation represents the industry behind the sport of motorsport. And there is that industry body behind cricket that makes cricket bats, cricket balls and so on. But as you can imagine, and stadiums like this, we have a similar stadium, but you can't see it all at one go because it disappears into the countryside. And we have a lot more equipment and suppliers behind it. So the organisation that I started, to be honest, a trade association from scratch a few years ago, 20 years ago, now represents 300 corporates around the world, and the governing bodies of motorsport, certain governing bodies are members of us, including NASCAR, Formula One teams, World Rally. These are the, if you like, the leagues within cricket who are our commercial partners to our industry body. I'm stalling this, I'm trying to remember my words. Pretty good, isn't
Sorry.
it?
Yeah.
So the organisation, the thing also that you'll see very quickly, because I'm going to move past them, is that we discovered maybe 10, am I on?
You're on.
You're on.
Oh, Christ.
Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. I'm sure I've actually heard this before. So that explains who we are, and you can see that one of the things we found in motorsport was to create strategic alliances some years ago, and you'll see that later. And we've, as an organisation, we've driven motorsport into unlikely areas, and we've already included creative on the bottom there. We made up a brand called Energy Efficient Motorsport. No race has ever been won without using energy efficiently. But it was a good brand because the government decided we should be energy efficient, so we claimed it and moved into that. But you'll see, we're the business network organisation. These slides are simply to give you a feel for the size of the industry in the UK. For those of you who want to engage with us, as Cricket just said, that's our business. 87% of our business is overseas. So it fulfills one of the ambitions of the programme in that this would go global. We're quite big locally as a sport, but truthfully, out of the UK, it is the home of global motorsport. The middle one is a substantial figure, as you can see underneath. That's 10 times the road car. It's double the pharmaceutical spend of sales. So 30%, pharmaceuticals, 15% of sales. We are constantly in development in our industry. I throw this up just so that you move away from Formula One. All of this is motorsport entertainment, every piece of this. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to name them all, but you can see that around the world, and then there is also the two-wheeled entertainment in motorsport too. This is just to show you how far we've taken motorsport in the last 15 years. These are all areas now with whom the motorsport companies and the teams engage and earn money from. Some people as much as 50%. Even in Sainsbury's, you'll see that the freezer cabinet is now powered by either McLaren or Williams with very clever technology. So we've cross-sectored our business, which is why I'm particularly interested to say we're kind of used to this journey of neither side really knowing anything about the other. Trust me, most of these, our good friends, have been for the last 15 years. We still don't understand one another. So there is a difference in language, culture, and so on. But we got our guys have got some knowledge of that. This is just a snapshot of what we believe. This bottom shot is one that I enjoy most of all, so that you understand why we're at an interesting position. This is the airflow over the car, which would be a fantastic, moving, entertaining image for our audience. That is produced purely for the entertainment of the engineers. The public don't get to see that. So we have all the data and all the glamour, and when I first showed it to one of my creative friends, why would you put it all in pretty colours if the audience doesn't see it? We just do. Because our audience, until right now, has been focused towards the engineer and not the fan. We've been abusing fans for years. We tell them nothing, we leave them in the dark, we disappear around a long lap and come back 2 minutes later and they're meant to work it all out. All of this area is available for motorsport, and you're way ahead of us in cricket. We all of those things we can back up with unlimited data. Each car sends away many teraflops of data each lap. Teraflops. We're not talking about it a little bit. And you can think all over the world these cars are throwing back vast quantities of data purely for the engineers. It is not used to any significant regard to the public. I throw up two examples because one of my many instructions that I got for this excellent meeting was give us some examples. The one on the left is purely, again, I find this amazing. This is data capture for engineers in MotoGP. So they put this helmet on and then they get a whole bunch of data off the bike, temperatures and brake usage and all the rest of it, and they can speak to one another and use that to tell them how to manipulate the bike for the next lap, but it doesn't go to the audience. And it's very similar in this area. This is Dassault in France, linked up for the Le Mans 24 hours. All this kit is to inform the team how to race the car and what the engineering is. Again, the audience doesn't get to enjoy that. Really quite bizarre. Now I'm going to try, well, Emily is going to try and make sure this one works, because there is a 23 seconds in or something. I'm just going to show you a little piece. One of the companies that we approached when we held our first open meeting there. If it's not going to work, we don't work.
I've had the link here. Let's see.
It might.
Might.
Press the button.
It's all right. No, it's happening.
No.
On YouTube.
No.
No?
Never mind.
Come on.
Is it just too slow? Should we just move on to another one? That was going to be NCAM's technology, which is used in Australian V8 cars.
Got this sound, but...
Okay, we don't need sound. Basically, it's using the NCAM technology. A car
yeah,
will
but
come
there is
up.
no...
The commentators
Oh,
will put the audience inside the car using augmented reality, and it's a kind of support mechanism to the entertainment. It's not live during the race. It's
don't know where it
used
happens.
just, if you like, as a studio or alongside the track.
How do you show?
Good.
That's a good question.
Oh, it's good. I can see it here. This is
Should
a
I
high
just
technology.
show around?
Yeah.
Just transmit
Yeah,
it
sorry.
from there to
It's
there.
very...
No? No, we can't do that.
yeah.
Well, let's move on to the next one, because I don't want to block. Yeah, just move on to the next one. That's mostly, but it's very interesting, and we can show you if you wish. You can come later. Move on to the next one. Augmented reality. This was a question over the use of the word immersive. We're not absolutely sure that this was immersive. We asked Jeff and one or two other guys. But Formula E is using a clever system of the fan boost, using their mobile phones, their smartphones, and the fans can vote on the phone during the race to give an extra squirt of power to their favourite driver. And during the broadcast, it comes up and is used as an entertainment factor. That they take the data, send it out to the car then gets an extra boost, and you see them overtake. And you can vote all over the world. Quite a clever system. No?
No, I don't know why it's not working.
Don't worry.
Same.
And that was the same. That you were going to really enjoy a tour of the Formula One paddock, which again, it was interesting that it was only done with Bose sound system, and it only had like 200,000 views. But it was for the people who get into the garage and in the paddock to look around the garage. But it hasn't expanded. Anything that's been out for over a year. So we are loaded with the early stage, in my view, early stage of this opportunity. And if it captures any of your imagination, the reason that we've been held back is that our Premier League, if you like, Formula One, was in the ownership of a chap that didn't agree with any of this stuff. He had a different business plan. He didn't have to engage with all this stuff, Bernie Ecclestone. But it's just been bought by Liberty Group, $8 billion. They bought this, and they're a fan entertainment-based business. So they are going to change Formula One, and if you like, that will cascade down to the others. So the timing is immaculate. And our numbers around the world are hundreds of millions. I think it's 200 million for each race. So collectively, it's a big global audience. Thank you for your patience. I'm sorry the technology's failed, but there we are. And thank you, Emily, for your patience.
Thanks, Chris. I mean, I think we'll all do well to follow all those links and actually have a look, because I think they represent many different ways of trying to engage with an audience that the motorsport sector are already doing. Finally, just in this bit, so Tim Part from MTM, familiar strategy consultancy to those of us who come from a media background, but also increasingly interested in the area of sports.
Absolutely, yes.
Just to kind of, I think what Tim's going to do is just kind of pick those things up and actually ask questions about where the commercial strategy is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Across the sector.
Thank you, Andrew, for the intro. I'm not sure my stand-up routine is suitable for polite company, so you probably saved the audience some pain there.
Sorry.
That's all right. Oh, I'll start anyway.
None of the errors due to the.
So I work for.
By the ECB.
Yeah, we're good.
Got it?
there's
So
no
let's
way.
go through.
The one after that. There we are.
There we go.
Perfect, thank you. All right, hello. So good to see everyone here. I work for MTM Sport. Just a few months ago, I would have said MTM London, but we have soft launch and will soon be formally launching a new sub-vertical of our business called MTM Sport. We have the official launch on the 5th of June, which everyone is more than welcome to come to. It's at Google HQ in their town hall in central St Giles in London. And if you'd like an invite, please do come and see me afterwards, and I'll make sure you get the details. It's very relevant to this forum here. We will be talking about what does the sports media landscape look like in 5 years' time. So, and I'm sure some discussion of AR, VR and XR will come up there. So just briefly, what do we do? Well, we offer these kind of services. Clearly, product development is very important here, but also, and this is what I'll talk about in this session, it's trying to turn what are nice ideas, as we've seen in the two presentations already, into something that is commercially viable and long-standing. You know, in a world where the vast majority of apps, around 70%, are deleted after the first month, and interesting UX such as VR is hampered by a lack of uptake of technology. You really got to think hard about, even if your idea is powerful and compelling, how to turn it into something that's going to make money for you and be useful in the long term. So 25 years ago, Rupert Murdoch used football as a battering ram. His quote, I believe, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you all, that's the super laser siege cannon from The Last Jedi, but you knew that already, didn't you? He used, and it's a high-tech battering ram, which is what he used to access the audience 25 years ago. That's not an effective tool anymore. It's not a state-of-the-art weapon in the armoury for the sports industry, certainly not in terms of accessing an audience, be it mass or otherwise. There's one overarching reason for this, I think, and that's globalisation. So tech, as we all know, has opened up the world to sports fans. OTT platforms have changed the way they consume content. Social media has created a culture of sharing, collaboration and personalisation. And as a result, fans are demanding deeper, personalised, more engaging content, such as what we're trying to create here. This applies at the local level as well. All fans are different. This is a study. They worked out what does the ideal man look like in different countries around the world. So you see he has the same face, but it's all slightly different. Much in the same way that marketing to a football fan in China is not the same way as you market to a football fan in the UK. See, in the UK, you support one team for life, mostly, whereas in China, you don't support anyone, really. You follow 3 or 4 teams, and your loyalties might wane as their success changes, whether their strip is red or not, whether your favourite player signs for them. It's very different. But more than that, there's more and more demands on the sports fans' time. So that could be from new sports, for example. We've seen MMA, the UFC grow spectacularly in the last few years. We've seen esports grow as well. Let's not have the debate about whether that's sport or not now. We can do that over lunch. That can come and eat the lunch of more mainstream sports like cricket and Formula One. But also, sports not just playing against each other anymore. It's not just about whether you watch cricket, whether you watch F1, whether you watch rugby, whether you watch Crown Bowls on BBC Two. It's about competing with the Amazons, the Facebooks, the Netflix of this world. Speaking of Netflix, there's Reed Hastings, Netflix chairman, and one of my favourite quotes is what he said here. He said, think about it, when you watch a show from Netflix and you get addicted to it, you stay up late at night. We've all done it, we've all binged the series. But in competing with Netflix, you're also competing with what the world he is in. They are competing with sleep. So what we have to create has to be super engaging, break down those barriers to entry that the public have, and make something really compelling. And the challenge is to get past that early adoption phase and make it a compelling proposition on an ongoing basis, which is very difficult. And I don't think anyone should be under any illusion of the magnitude of the task that we have to build this. So, so there's lots of state-of-the-art new technologies out there that we're seeing in the market, everything from smart stadia, when you swipe your season ticket, which is no longer showed at a turnstile, you take it in and it's like an Oyster card. You go in and they know what your drink is, they have it ready for you at the bar, it's delivered to your seat, and so on and so forth. The second screen is emerging but still hasn't been cracked. Fantasy sports, there's a load of stuff, and that's all very, very sexy. In my world, the strategy world, sadly, it's somewhat less sexy. And it goes something like this. So it's not about these exciting technologies, it's about how you use them. So in this world of Manchester United, where you've got, allegedly, 659 million fans globally, that's a number they gave themselves as a health warning in 2013. Most of them are in Plymouth, of course. But they've only got 73 million fans on Facebook, and wait for it, I hope people at the back have got their sharp eyes. That's the size of their stadium. 74,000 people only. So the question is, it's obviously a great idea that these 659 million fans can whack on a VR headset and be watching a game in the ground, caveat rights, etc. But it's how do you apply it? How is that the first stage on a journey to them coming to the stadium one day, to engaging fully commercially with Manchester United rather than just watching once on a VR and then not doing it again? So that's my state of the art. And it relies on 4 things, really. World-class research. You know, there has to be a rationale. It's very easy to come up with great immersive experience, but knowing whether it's going to get traction in the market is very difficult. That comes from media expertise. How do you use OTT platforms? How do you, get the rights you need? How should those rights be valued? That's some work we've done in the past. It's about strategic thinking. It's about knowing what the trends are, understanding them, and really taking a cold, dispassionate view. We can all get very excited about VR and AR, but is it really going to work? That's where that quality of thinking comes in. And of course, it's about data. We've heard about how data can inform the actual product itself, but data about the audience, knowing what they want, understanding how they use these products. That's all on the first stage to creating a compelling proposition. It's going to be difficult, but I'm confident we can get there.
Thanks, Ed.
Let's see if these. Oh yes, they are on. Excellent. So okay, in that very mild-mannered way of yours, Tim, that was really quite provocative, wasn't it? So let's pick up the kind of the point right at the end there. I mean, let's not do the. It's very easy to make a compelling immersive experience, because I'm not sure that's quite that simple. But I think the challenge you set out there is that we can all get very excited about it, but is it actually going? Do we actually believe it's going to be a big thing? So, Chris, David, do you actually believe it's going to be a big thing in your sports?
Yes, I do.
Not a trick question.
And it's not a trick question, and I will differentiate between AR and VR. But
Yep.
I think in the next 5 years, AR in sport will be enormous. And I think, as I said, the size of the addressable market means that what you can do to increase that fan experience is really exciting. And I think that in a world of endless opportunity for fans of sport, if you're not doing that as a sport, then you are putting yourself at risk. I would differentiate that from VR. I think the VR opportunity is a much longer one. And the reason I would say that is because I think that the penetration of high-resolution headsets will take longer. And Google Cardboard, whilst a very fun product, doing sport on Google Cardboard is not going to be a great experience. You know, you need 4K VR minimum resolution, and I think the analogy I would put to is the SD HD 4K analogy in TV, and I think at the moment we're in SD in the VR space, and to do sport really well in the VR space, I think we're going to need that evolution in technology. I think that will come really quickly. But I think you need the evolution in technology, then you need the consumer uptake, and then you've got a really interesting experience. I also think, and why I think your program is really exciting, is there's a lot of experimentation to be done in this space. So, for example, in VR with sport, are we talking about short form or long form? So I think the presumption at the moment is long form. I actually wonder whether the short form experience in VR in sport is going to be more interesting, more exciting. So can I go and watch a 5-minute highlights package and experience Joe Root getting bowled? As opposed to I want to sit down and watch a 3-hour game, and some of the stuff you said about VR making people sick if they do it for too long is that's genuinely worth reflecting on.
It is. I think I'm sure that there are things that we can point to that make them less sick. Chris, big thing. I mean, one of the things that within your presentations, lots of experiments within the motorsports arena, both from the team side, no rather than public facing. Is making it a big thing, a lot of that bringing it out to the audience?
Yes, I would say, having just heard these excellent presentations as compared to my nonsensical one, there's that I think we'll learn from one another incredibly quickly. And I just whispered to my friend here, well, let's get together and put motorsport and cricket together. And I have a feeling, knowing I've been in the sports business since I left school, not motorsport, but the sports business, we'll learn off one another incredibly quickly. Motorsport got heavily involved in the America's Cup because nobody knew where the boats were. It was one of those great sporting occasions that you couldn't see. And we've all our teams of engineers have become involved in taking that sport. The yachting people had to come to the motorsport people to say, how would you turn this into an idea that we can follow? And I have a feeling that it's going to happen the same way, and therefore be a faster growing improvement, because sports will learn off sports. Our stadium, sadly, as I've said, is across country, and we can't hold them in this kind of form, and that will also change the experience that we'll all offer. Can I see fans in a grandstand sitting with the headsets on? That's going to be tough, but can I see them using AR in a way? But certainly, no, a very, very big change in this UK industry is right on the horizon, and this is so timely.
Just pick up on a couple of points there. You're absolutely right. I think the challenge to consumer uptake is that there's been no clear application for this yet. So The Guardian are doing a lot with VR and AR through their app, and a lot of it is sports content because that's premium and that's what people want to see. So, for example, they had Anthony Joshua fighting himself using motion capture. I don't know who won. Probably Anthony Joshua. But it's low volume, and The Guardian are really excited about it. But they admit that it's still a nice to have, and I think that's what's going to break the dam. Is that difference between someone going, "Oh, that's neat, I like that," but then someone going, "That's awesome, and I can use it again and again. I can see the benefit to me." So, the Man United example, being in the stadium, that's great. That might drive it. Seeing Joe Root catching up on the highlights when you can't see if you haven't got access to TV, that's great.
I'll just pick up something which will show you how I think we're going to... You saw all those funny other sectors that we've worked in as an industry. And in the room we've got from Austria, the world's largest simulation company for motoring, automotive and motorsport. Now I can see them offering a service to you guys to say, what is it you're trying to simulate? Well, it's easy for them to do if you have the data, and you do have the data. And in motorsport, for example, they're going to be working on, you'll be interested in this, the eSport series for Formula One is now owned by Formula One, and those guys have now driven, the young guys have done a world championship on all the circuits, you've all seen that. They are now employed by Formula One for next season, all those drivers, to be the test drivers in simulation to change the starting pattern of future races. So that already we're seeing the use of simulation crossing into esports, and others will watch that. And it just occurs to me that our friends in Austria probably don't know anything about cricket, but they could simulate something.
Can I just add one more thing, since you're here representing the government? So the other
unusually, and let's face it, incredibly.
The other thing that's really pertinent in this is the driving of uptake of superfast broadband. So without underlying consumer networks at the speeds required to deliver this stuff, the consumer proposition is going to be much harder to deliver. So at the moment, the government is 95% superfast broadband, but I think uptake's sitting around 30%. Unless we drive that uptake of superfast broadband, we're not going to deliver a great in-home consumer experience.
There was a time when the government were looking for opportunities and examples of things that would drive super fast. So maybe we're suggesting going back into DCMS and saying, sports immersive. There's a reason.
You may say that. I couldn't possibly comment.
Okay, let's change tack a little bit. And we're now venturing into an area where you three all know a lot, and I know even less about sports rights than I know about film financing. And the only thing I know about film financing is to stay a long way away from it. So, rights, it's complicated. I guess there are several questions. How do we value rights that we don't even have an audience for? How does the current rights position across different sports enable freedom to act? And who can lead the charge in changing these things and making this possible? Who wants to have a go at that with respect? Do we go to the position in?
No, I'll take it.
Yeah.
And then I'll talk about ours.
So it is difficult. It's difficult to value rights when you think how many people are going to watch it anyway, because there's so many different commercial angles to wrap up in it with partnerships and things like that. I think you could let the market decide if that's what it is, but I think actually a big opportunity here might not be actual live rights showing what they are, because they're quite expensive, and that's kind of that's what people expect, and it takes a lot of broadcast nous, it'd be that radio, TV, whatever, to do it. I think what we're seeing is there's a big crossover between sports and lifestyle now. So you see brands like Vice Sport, like Copper 90, like Unscripted, who are on Twitter. Basically, they you go and see what players in these sports are doing outside when they're not on the pitch for 90 minutes or 5 days or 2 hours in a car. That's the kind of content that the public are after. They can go and get the rights somewhere else, and let's be honest, the broadcasters have got a lot of experience with this, and they're going to do it a lot better. So what they want is that added bonus that they can't get anywhere else. Because sports fans still like to live, eat, breathe sport. It's just now they're doing it in different ways, and rights coverage is so ubiquitous. Whether you've got a Sky subscription or not for the major sports, it's about going that extra mile and engaging them in those different ways. Looking at the story behind the sport. So look at what Vice do. And look at the culture of sport and the business of sport. Copper 90 tell fan stories, and Unscripted, that's fairly gratuitous. Cristiano Ronaldo pouncing around his home with his top off, but it's got a market apparently. That's something to consider. It doesn't have to be live action. We all equate sports with live action and the thrill of the crowd, but there's a whole different world out there that you can tap into as well.
Some frightening images there.
Sorry.
To kind of deal with, but in terms, let's go back. I think you guys have both been talking essentially about that live, at least an element of this being about the live action experience. So, are we boxed in by rights? Is there a relationship here with the broadcast deals that all sports do that stops, potentially gets in the way of doing some of the things we're trying to encourage here?
Yeah. So look, I think a lot of sports bodies have gone in different directions on this. I can tell you the direction we've gone in without going into too much of the commercial details of the deals we've done with Sky and the BBC, which is we have reserved our position in this space so that we can experiment as much as we can and as much as we want to. So we are able to work with Sky and the BBC, who are obviously the two biggest media companies in this country, and are doing a lot of work at the moment, as you can imagine, around VR and AR. Equally, we have the option to experiment ourselves and do whatever we want to in this space, and that was a critical part of our the deals that we did last year, because we believe that I think what Tim says is right, but I don't think anyone knows at the moment, right? I don't think anybody knows whether it's live sport in traditional forms, or it's a version of live sport, or if it's different type of content that's going to work in this space. So we're all about experimenting, trying to understand what works. I think there'll be a real need to try and fail quickly in this space, and then to go again to find out what the right thing is. And what we've done is we've reserved our rights position to give us maximum flexibility to do that.
I'd just to add something to that. You have the benefit of effectively governing body of cricket, and cricket is here. We have a governing body of the world of motorsport with a myriad of cricket games, whether it's Formula One or MotoGP or cars or a Formula Electric. I think there's two things I would say is this is such a perfect time for motorsport under new ownership of the Premier League, who has thrown out of the window so many deals that they had before. So they're renegotiating all over the place. I hate to say it about the commercial side of our sport, but it's money driven. We're not anywhere remotely as sporting as cricket. And I just think you're not going to make an omelette without breaking eggs. There's going to be some tears shed, but money will out, and IP solutions will be the order of the day if those who own them know the open sesame that this whole new world is going to bring. I just can't see them being anything other than, as best they can, helpful and supportive, because they know that the gold at the end of the rainbow is so much more than where they are now. So that's my naive prediction. Now, there'll be blood and tears and struggles, but money will out in commercial sport.
Just one last thing. I think secondary rights are very important. So Liverpool, Manchester United and Chelsea all run perfectly serviceable TV channels on the Sky platform and online, with actually, other than pre-season friendlies, zero rights of their first team actually playing. It's
documentaries, opinion pieces, interviews, that kind of thing. But the live rights they do have are the pre-season tour, the under-21 games, the women's games, and so on and so forth. And that's an added extra on top. So, you can enjoy the corollary, shine of rights by picking up secondary rights and being part of that system.
Okay, two last questions. First one, to deliver the kind of visions that you have, and you've talked about, how you see the world and developing this in terms of different immersive propositions. David, you mentioned superfast broadband. So, given that, taking that as read, what are the technological challenges that you see, or you currently see, thinking, I don't know if we even know anybody who can help us do that? What are the technological challenges, the kind of R&D challenges that you think?
Yeah, so I was I was lucky enough to go to California last year and talk to a bunch of companies, including a bunch of VR companies. I think for cricket, lens technology is absolutely fundamental. So, it's a game which is played with a small ball in quite a big space. When I looked at, for example, there's a whole bunch of companies out there, but NextVR who do the NBA, the cameras that they use, the resolution that they're working at wouldn't be sufficient for cricket. We talked to a number of other companies who are working on multiple camera with fisheye lenses, and that becomes really critical, because I don't think it's critical just because of the size of the ball. I think actually the experience, it goes back to this point about it's got to feel 4K, not SD, to be a really viable, I think, consumer proposition. So that would be one. There's a lot of questions about kind of the space it takes up in stadiums. So we've already got a lot of fixed cameras. Now the advantage of VR cameras is they're pretty small, but you've got to understand how you work out the topography of a stadium if you're going to do something in a stadium, and then actually just the underlying technology of AR particularly. I think there are a lot of very interesting companies now springing up around AR technology. I think Pokemon Go is it is a 1.0 version of AR, isn't it? And so it's we don't understand that, and we need to work with people who understand that.
Chris, I guess you're slightly different in that your own members are technologists.
Yeah.
I
wish they weren't.
But they work across all. They're leading lots of medical VR
yeah.
type interventions as well.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. What the difference about our experience is going to be, our viewers are going to strap themselves to the cricket ball. Ours is very personalised. They will want to be. We've had several meetings and discussions of this. They want to be in the car. It's pretty obvious. And you can come up with all kinds of solutions, but if they say, "Well, I can't get in the car," or "I can't get that experience," I would say that's quite challenging, from what I understand. Because the car in itself, having driven race cars for 20 years, it's not a very comfortable experience, and so to somehow desensitize that and yet keep the thrill of it. I think that would be quite challenging. I don't think it's beyond capabilities, but as I say, if you were to strap your audience to the cricket ball and they'd thump into the ground, and they'd be doing 100 miles an hour off the surface, that's what we've somehow got to capture. But we're nearly there, because our cars are entertaining engineers with teraflops of data. Anyway, they're just sending them down a channel back to the factory. So you'd think that with the clever people in the room and around the country, we'll say, well, we can build something out of that. And the few conversations I've had suggest that we can come up with some pretty cool stuff. But we've got to get on top of the cricket ball or in the car.
Okay, so in the end, that's all about actually creating that audience experience that delights rather than is just possible. So last question. Let's say the assumption is we can only fund one of these. And who knows where it will be, but if there's one thing that you'd want this competition to crack, what would it be? Because as you've both said, Tim said as well, you can all sports can learn from each other. So what would be the one thing that you'd write in the spec saying, solve this, and that'll be doing us a favour?
Blimey. I think it'll ultimately come down to storytelling. So for all the technology, for all the underlying challenges, for all the opportunities, ultimately what you're still trying to do is create engaging content that people, so that creative and that content side of it, is hugely, hugely important. I think, you see this with the US technology companies, don't you? Which is they come in, and they think that technology is the solution, and they find out eventually that storytelling is the solution and technology is the enabler. And in this space at the moment, it feels like we are still in the space where the technology is really exciting, and it's driven by people who are really excited about the technology, and we need to bring that creative storytelling side in and get those two things working together to really make a great consumer proposition.
Yeah, I'd have to say that since the first chariot races in Roman times, I wasn't there, but there were 500,000 spectators had walked miles to watch that, and we still enjoy watching transport now. I think we would all benefit if this can turn from being a kind of a figment of the imagination to the public. We have the hottest thing. I mean, I've spent my life in it. It's the best thing to be in sport. It's whether you like cricket or baseball or any damn thing. It's in itself, it's great and it's got fans. To actually get those fans and take them into a new experience, that to me the biggest thing this could do, whether it's for cricket or motorsport, is to change the public understanding of something real, not something they peer at and say, I think I've read about this and read about this. No, to turn that with the energy and enthusiasm and passion that you have for your sport, boy, that would change it overnight.
Yeah, I'll double down on that and say I think the biggest thing this could do is attract new audiences to sports. So you've got your pool of people, and of the existing supporters, fans. If you're fishing in that, there'll be a 1% conversion or whatever. What if it suddenly was the spark that made someone who wasn't a fan of cricket before think, oh, that's really cool, maybe I'll get into it this way, or someone who's not considered driving around a racetrack very fast before as fun suddenly sees this and goes, wow, that does look actually quite fun. So, it acting as an expander of whichever game it is or sport generally, if that can do it, that would be amazing.
Can I make a comment? Because I want to share this incredible wisdom. I was writing a speech about this about 10 months ago before it even got off the ground. And I found myself wondering what the hell the difference is between a fan and an audience, and a fan and an audience. Because I kept finding I was switching. And it's, I think, being in sport all my life, this is really true. A fan doesn't go away, a fanatic. Now, we've been abusing our fans for 30 or 40 years in lousy grandstands, awful food, terrible communications. They're still there. 180,000 of them still go to one race at Silverstone despite everything going wrong. You can't get rid of a fan. You can really now increase your audience. And of course, you look at an audience, completely different. They are willing to hop from one thing to another. I mean, channel hopping, for example. But there'll be a little bit of cricket. I enjoyed that day, but now I'll go to golf. Now I'll go to this. That's the trick. And when I read the title of this, I thought this was quite inspired because it is the audience we're after. We've got the fans. We can give them a much better experience. But the fact that you're focusing on increasing our audience means a lot to me.
And I was going to say this for the last question, but it's important here as well. And the key to that, this is very boring, is that you can create something really wow, amazing, whizzy bang. But if the UX is not there, and if when that's finished, they think, okay, what's next? If you haven't got that journey, then no matter how good it is, people are just going to turn off. So you really got to think about the user experience, the interface, etc., etc., etc. So that's quite dull, but it's, you risk wasting millions of pounds if you've created the most beautiful thing ever, but if people can't use it, it's going to be for nothing.
Okay, well, who would ever accuse anybody of being nerdy about UX who would show a Star Wars slide? So getting it out there, making it real, storytelling, and expanding beyond the fan base. I mean, they seem the kind of key kind of messages. So I think that's a good place to close on. So thank you to David Marnie, Chris Ayler, and Tim Potts. And I was just saying, do you want any questions? If we've got time for questions. Have we got time for, yeah, let's do that then. We normally never have time. Yeah, okay, right. Audience.
Yes.
Because these guys are going to answer.
No.
Hi. So first, not being in traditional sports, these were super insightful talks. So thanks for sharing your wisdom there. When we look at the audience of the future, and it's come up a couple of times, I think the esports audience is probably right now sort of one lens that may give us a little preview. And in many ways, they're early adopters, they're tech savvy. There's tons of data in esports, possibly rivaling even motorsports, very permissive legal landscapes. So we've been working with the esports industry for a while, and they see tons of potential in second screen apps, in data-driven experience that create those insights that sort of lay bare these complexities. The AR and VR space hasn't really sort of kicked off, despite mainstream titles providing that. Does that make any one of you nervous, or should that make us nervous and sort of playing our own devil's advocate, so to speak?
Esports is, I find it fascinating. We could get into the debate about whether it's sports or not, as Tim said earlier. It's leveraging off an enormous base, right, which is gaming. And actually what esports is the elite competitive version of a mass participation thing which has been building over 30 years. And it's really just, that's all it is. It is the elite version of mass market gaming. And, when you look at the figures about gaming in this country and globally, and you compare it to TV audiences, I never understand why people don't talk more about the gaming industry as opposed to the TV industry. It's a much bigger industry. Right. I think we're talking about a totally different space here because it's much more nascent. So, I think we should be healthily nervous because there's no proven model around AR and VR at the moment. But I wouldn't. For me, the esports AR VR comparison is not one that worries me.
For me, it's about context. So perversely, this kind of technology might appeal to non-tech people rather than tech people. So when I go and play cricket at the weekends down at my local club, I'm all right. I score a few runs. If you put me on the pitch out there, I'd be absolutely terrible and score nothing. It's the same. If you put VR, AR in a context where people aren't, in a technological environment already, it will seem really good. But if you put it in esports, people are like, well, I've got all these screens already and there's awesome gameplay, and it doesn't add that much to the experience, whereas in the non-esports world, it adds incrementally that much to the experience. So I think context is important.
I'll just make one comment. I'm like yourself. I'm struggling to really bite on esports, but I'm delighted by the volume. So to me, it's almost like another dish on the menu. And having been to the NEC and seeing those 3-nighters and 4-nighters where they sleep on the floor and play, I still understand it even less. But it's another audience. Now, whether they will translate into a commercial audience for cricket or ourselves in a really meaningful way, never mind whether it's AR or MR or anything, I'm not really sure we're even at the beginning of seeing that crossover. I don't know whether they're fans of cricket and motorsport or fans of esports, if you see what I mean. And that means we're really in the early days of this new explosion.
I mean, if you look at the league table of the tournament prize money, it's things like Overwatch and League of Legends or whatever at the top. And there's only, I think, actually 2 sports titles in the top 50 by prize money around the world, and that's FIFA and John Madden football. It's not really the same audience. I mean, for whatever reason, sports hasn't really taken in the esports world, weirdly. So I wouldn't be too worried because they're not the same audiences as well as the context point.